What I'm about to reveal to you is so psychologically dangerous that entire industries have built billion-dollar empires on making sure you never discover it. Right now, as you're listening to my voice, your emotions are being manipulated, your decisions are being influenced, and your mind is being controlled by forces you can't even see. But the ancient Stoics knew something that modern psychology has only recently confirmed. There's one simple mental technique that makes you completely immune to this manipulation. Marcus Aurelius used it to rule an empire. Epictetus used it to transform from slave to the most respected teacher in Rome. And when you learn this technique in the next few minutes, you'll understand why they've spent centuries trying to hide this knowledge from you. But here's what's truly dangerous about this. Once you see it, you can never unsee it. Your entire reality will shift, and you'll realize that everything you thought was out of your control was actually within your power all along. If you're ready to reclaim your mental freedom and join thousands of others walking the Stoic path, then subscribe right now and let me show you the psychological weapon they never wanted you to possess. Think about your last emotional breakdown. Maybe it was road rage when someone cut you off. Maybe it was scrolling through social media and suddenly feeling inadequate, looking at everyone else's highlight reels. Maybe it was your boss criticizing your work and you spent the entire day replaying that conversation, feeling smaller and smaller with each mental repetition. In that moment, you probably felt like a victim, like something was happening to you that was completely beyond your control. You felt hijacked, manipulated by circumstances, other people, or even your own mind. And you know what? You were absolutely right to feel that way, because you were being manipulated. But not in the way you think. Every single day, you wake up and enter a world designed to keep you emotionally reactive. Your smartphone notifications are engineered by teams of neuroscientists to trigger dopamine spikes and create addiction cycles. The news media profits from keeping you in a constant state of fear and outrage because scared, angry people click more links and watch more ads. Social media platforms use sophisticated algorithms to show you content that will provoke the strongest emotional response, because engagement equals profit. Your workplace culture might reward drama and crisis management over calm, strategic thinking. Even your relationships might have unconscious patterns where emotional reactivity gets you attention or sympathy. You're swimming in an ocean of emotional manipulation, and the worst part is, you've been taught that this is just normal life. But what if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers discovered the ultimate defense against all of this? What if I told you that this defense is so powerful that it doesn't just protect you from manipulation, it actually transforms you into the kind of person who cannot be controlled, cannot be broken, and cannot be defeated by any external circumstances? And what if I told you that this technique is so threatening to systems of control that it's been systematically suppressed, watered down, and hidden from mainstream education for centuries? The technique I'm talking about comes from Stoic philosophy. But before you roll your eyes and think this is going to be some boring history lesson, let me tell you why this matters to your life right now. Today, the Stoics weren't just philosophers, sitting around debating abstract concepts. They were the most powerful and successful people of their time. Marcus Aurelius was literally the emperor of Rome, controlling the most powerful empire in human history, and he credited his success to Stoic practices. Epictetus went from being a slave to becoming the most sought-after teacher in the ancient world. Seneca was one of the wealthiest and most influential advisors to multiple emperors. These weren't people who retreated from the world, they mastered it. And they did it using psychological techniques that modern neuroscience is only now beginning to understand. Here's what recent research has discovered about the Stoic practices. When you engage in what psychologists call cognitive distancing, which is essentially what the Stoics called the view from above, your brain activity literally changes. The emotional centers of your brain, particularly the amygdala, become less reactive. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational decision-making, becomes more active. Your stress hormones like cortisol decrease, while neurotransmitters associated with well-being and focus increase. In other words, this isn't just philosophy, it's a scientifically proven method for upgrading your mental operating system. So what exactly is this technique that's so dangerous they don't want you to know it? It's deceptively simple, which is why it's so powerful. The Stoics called it the discipline of perception, and it's based on one fundamental insight that will change everything once you truly understand it. Here it is: you cannot control what happens to you, but you have complete control over how you perceive and respond to what happens to you. And when I say complete control, I mean complete. No exceptions, no special circumstances. No matter how bad things get, no matter who is trying to manipulate you, no matter what emotional triggers are being pushed, you always have the power to choose your response. But here's where it gets really dangerous for those who profit from your emotional reactivity. When you truly internalize this principle, you become unprofitable. You can't be sold fear because you don't react with fear. You can't be manipulated with anger because you choose not to be angry. You can't be controlled with shame because you refuse to feel ashamed. You become what the Stoics called unassailable, literally unable to be attacked, because there's no emotional weak point that others can exploit. Let me show you exactly how this works with a practical example. Imagine you're scrolling through social media and you see a post from someone you know showing off their new car, their perfect relationship, their amazing vacation. Immediately, you feel that familiar pang of inadequacy. Your inner voice starts saying things like, "Why don't I have that? What's wrong with my life? I'm such a failure." This is the normal human response, and it's exactly what social media companies want, because it keeps you scrolling, comparing, and clicking on ads for products that promise to make you feel better about yourself. But here's what a trained Stoic would do in that exact same situation. The moment they notice that emotional reaction starting, they would pause and apply the technique I'm about to teach you. They would mentally step back from the situation and ask themselves, what is actually happening here? And they would realize that what's actually happening is that photons are hitting their retina, creating an image in their brain, and they are choosing to interpret that image in a way that makes them feel bad about themselves. They would recognize that the person posting probably chose their best moment, applied filters, and crafted a narrative designed to present their life in the most positive light possible. They would remember that everyone has struggles, everyone has moments of doubt and sadness, and social media shows none of that. Most importantly, they would realize that this other person's experience has absolutely nothing to do with their own worth, their own journey, or their own potential for happiness. This is what the Stoics called the view from above. You zoom out mentally and see the situation from a broader perspective. You see yourself as an actor on a stage, but you also see yourself as the director of the play. You realize that you're not trapped in the emotion, you're observing it, understanding it, and choosing how to respond to it. And in that moment of choice, you reclaim your power. Now, let me teach you the specific 3-step process that will make this automatic for you. Step 1 is what I call the pause. The moment you notice any strong emotional reaction, anger, fear, sadness, jealousy, whatever it is, you pause. You don't try to suppress the emotion or pretend it's not there. You acknowledge it and say to yourself, I notice I'm having a strong emotional reaction right now. This simple act of noticing creates what psychologists call metacognition, thinking about thinking. It activates the rational part of your brain and creates space between you and the emotion. Step 2 is the zoom out. This is where you apply the view from above. You imagine yourself floating up and looking down at the situation from a higher perspective. You might imagine yourself a year from now, looking back at this moment. You might imagine how this situation will matter in the context of your entire life. You might imagine yourself as a wise observer, watching this drama unfold with compassion but without attachment. The key is to create psychological distance between yourself and the immediate emotional reaction. Step 3 is the choice. This is where you consciously decide how you want to respond, not how you feel like responding, not how you've always responded in the past, but how the person you want to become would respond. You ask yourself, given who I want to be and what I want to create in my life, how should I respond to this situation? And then you choose that response. Regardless of how you feel in the moment, here's why this technique is so threatening to systems that depend on your emotional reactivity. When you can pause, zoom out, and choose your response, you become incredibly powerful. Politicians can't manipulate you with fear-based messaging because you see through the emotional manipulation to the underlying agenda. Advertisers can't make you buy things you don't need by making you feel inadequate, because you recognize the manipulation and choose not to participate. Toxic people in your life can't push your buttons anymore because you've disconnected the buttons from automatic responses. You become what Marcus Aurelius called, like a rocky headland on which the waves constantly break, the chaos swirls around you. but you remain unmoved. But here's what's even more powerful about this technique. It doesn't just protect you from external manipulation, it frees you from internal manipulation as well. Your own mind has been conditioned by years of programming to react in certain ways. You might have patterns of self-doubt, perfectionism, people-pleasing, or emotional volatility that feel completely automatic and unchangeable. But when you apply this three-step process consistently, you realize that even these internal patterns are just habits of perception that you can change. Let me give you another example of how this works in real life. Imagine your boss calls you into their office and criticizes a project you've been working on. Your automatic reaction might be defensiveness, anger, or crushing self-doubt. You might spend the rest of the day replaying the conversation, imagining what you should have said, feeling terrible about yourself, and either plotting revenge or spiraling into depression. This is the normal human response, and it's exactly what keeps you trapped in emotional reactivity. But applying the Stoic technique, you would pause the moment you notice the emotional reaction starting. You would zoom out and see the situation clearly. Your boss is under pressure. They're trying to solve a problem, and they've identified something they think needs to be fixed. Their emotional state and their delivery have nothing to do with your worth as a person. You would recognize that criticism, even harsh criticism, is just information that you can use to improve your work or decide whether this is the right environment for you. And then you would choose your response based on what serves your long-term goals, not your short-term emotions. You might ask clarifying questions to understand exactly what needs to be changed. You might acknowledge the feedback and commit to specific improvements. You might even recognize that this job isn't aligned with your values and begin planning your transition to something better. But you wouldn't waste a single moment of your mental energy on defensiveness, anger, or self-doubt. This is what the Stoics meant when they said that external events are neither good nor bad, they simply are. It's our judgments about these events that create our emotional experiences. And since we control our judgments, we control our emotional experiences. This doesn't mean becoming emotionless or cold. It means becoming emotionally intelligent and emotionally sovereign. You can still feel joy, love, excitement, and passion, but you feel them by choice, not by accident. You're no longer at the mercy of whatever random stimulus happens to trigger you on any given day. Now, I want to address the most common objection people have when they first learn about this technique. They say, but if I don't react emotionally, won't I lose my passion? Won't I become boring and robotic? This comes from a fundamental misunderstanding of what emotions are and how they work. The Stoics weren't advocating for the suppression of emotions, they were advocating for the conscious direction of emotions. There's a huge difference between being emotionally reactive and being emotionally responsive. Reactive means you're at the mercy of whatever triggers come your way. Responsive means you're choosing your emotional states based on what serves your highest good. Asterisk. Think about the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A thermometer simply reacts to the temperature around it. If the environment gets hot, it shows hot. If the environment gets cold, it shows cold. It has no choice in the matter. A thermostat, on the other hand, is set to a specific temperature and works to maintain that temperature regardless of what's happening in the environment. When it gets too hot, the thermostat turns on the air conditioning. When it gets too cold, the thermostat turns on the heat. The thermostat has agency. It's working toward a predetermined goal rather than just reacting to circumstances. Most people live their emotional lives like thermometers. If someone is rude to them, they feel angry. If they see something on social media that triggers their insecurities, they feel bad about themselves. If they watch the news, they feel afraid or outraged. Their emotional state is completely dependent on external circumstances. But when you master this Stoic technique, you become like a thermostat for your emotional life. You decide what emotional state serves you best, and you work to maintain that state, regardless of what's happening around you. This doesn't mean you become emotionally numb, or that you stop caring about things. In fact, the opposite happens. When you're no longer wasting emotional energy on reactive responses to random triggers, you have much more emotional capacity available for the things that truly matter to you. You can love more deeply because you're not constantly distracted by petty irritations. You can pursue your goals more effectively because you're not derailed by every setback or criticism. You can contribute more meaningfully to the world because you're operating from a place of strength and clarity rather than fear and reactivity. Here's how you can start implementing this technique immediately. For the next 24 hours, I want you to pay attention to your emotional reactions. Don't try to change them yet, just notice them. Every time you feel a strong emotion, whether positive or negative, pause and ask yourself, what just triggered this feeling? You'll be amazed at how often your emotions are triggered by completely trivial things: a comment someone made, something you saw online, a memory that popped into your head, or even just physical sensations like hunger or fatigue. Once you've spent a day just observing your emotional patterns, start applying the 3-step process. Pause, zoom out, and choose your response. Remember, this is a practice, not a perfection. You're not going to master this overnight, and you're not expected to. Even Marcus Aurelius, who had been practicing Stoicism for decades, wrote in his personal journal about times when he got emotionally reactive and had to remind himself to return to these principles. The goal isn't to never have emotional reactions. The goal is to have conscious emotional responses more and more often. As you practice this technique, you'll start to notice some profound changes in your life. First, you'll become much more resilient to stress and adversity. Things that used to completely derail your day will become minor inconveniences that you handle with grace and efficiency. Second, your relationships will improve dramatically because you'll stop taking things personally and start responding to people from a place of understanding rather than defensiveness. Third, you'll become much more effective at achieving your goals because you won't be constantly distracted by emotional drama and reactivity. Fourth, you'll develop an unshakable sense of inner peace and confidence because you'll know that no matter what happens, you have the tools to handle it. But perhaps most importantly, you'll reclaim your mental freedom. You'll realize that happiness isn't something that happens to you based on external circumstances. It's something you create through your conscious choices, moment by moment. You'll understand that you are not a victim of your emotions, your circumstances, or other people's behavior. You are the author of your own experience, and you have the power to write whatever story you choose. This is why this technique is so dangerous to systems that profit from your emotional reactivity. When enough people understand that they have complete control over their internal experience, the entire foundation of manipulation-based industries starts to crumble. Fear-based political messaging loses its power. Advertising based on manufactured insecurity becomes ineffective. Social media algorithms designed to provoke outrage and comparison stop working. Toxic relationship dynamics that depend on emotional manipulation simply fall apart. You become what the Stoics called a citizen of the cosmos, someone who operates from universal principles of wisdom, justice, courage, and self-discipline rather than from the petty emotional reactivity that keeps most people trapped in cycles of suffering. You join the ranks of those throughout history who have refused to be controlled by external circumstances and have instead chosen to create their own meaning, their own peace, and their own powerful response to whatever life brings. The path forward is simple, but it's not easy. It requires daily practice, constant vigilance, and the courage to take responsibility for your own emotional life rather than blaming your reactions on external circumstances. But the reward is nothing less than complete mental freedom and the kind of unshakable inner strength that allows you to thrive no matter what challenges you face. If you're ready to join thousands of others who are walking the Stoic path to mental freedom and emotional mastery, subscribe to this channel right now. Every week, I share practical techniques from ancient Stoic philosophy that you can use immediately to transform your life. And if this video has already started to shift your perspective on what's possible for your emotional life, hit the like button and leave a comment below telling me about a situation where you're going to apply this 3-step technique. Remember, the moment you start practicing this is the moment you begin reclaiming your power. The question isn't whether this technique works. The question is whether you're ready to do the work to make it work for you. Your mental freedom is waiting. The only question is, are you ready to claim it?